The stifling Texas heat pressed down on the asphalt when a dark shape on the curb disrupted the quiet afternoon. Something small, motionless. At first glance, it looked like a crumpled piece of cloth left behind by the wind. But then came the realization, a tiny being, far too fragile to be alone under that relentless sun. His heart pounded. Without thinking, he knelt down and touched the little creature. Skin too hot, breathing weak. If he didn't do something, it wouldn't make it. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he held the small body against his chest and started running. He didn't know how, but he had to save it. What he didn't realize was that in that very moment, his own life was about to change. It was a sweltering day in a small Texas town. The heat shimmered over the asphalt and the scent of dry earth mixed with the smoky aroma of barbecue drifting from a nearby backyard. Nathan Carter walked through the neighborhood at an unhurried pace, sweat trailing down his neck, his mind lost in the day's worries. His routine was becoming increasingly monotonous. 26. He worked at a small local office, dealing with endless stacks of paperwork that seemed to go nowhere. He lived alone in a modest house he had inherited from his grandparents, and while he appreciated the quiet of small-town life, lately he felt like something was missing, like he was just going through the motions, waiting for something, anything, to make him feel truly alive. He kicked a loose pebble along the sidewalk, distracted. There was no rush to get home. The evening would be the same as always. A quick dinner, an episode of some show he'd already seen, and maybe a few hours of online gaming to pass the time. But then something caught his attention. On the curb, a small dark spot stood out against the pavement. At first, it looked like nothing more than an old discarded rag, baking in the sun. But as he stepped closer, he realized it was something else, something alive. His heart sped. Nathan crouched down, frowning as he examined the tiny, unmoving creature in front of him. It was so small, so helpless. Its tiny chest rose and fell in a faint, unsteady rhythm. Tight knot formed in his stomach. He had never thought much about rescuing animals, never really considered himself the nurturing type. But in that hot, stifling afternoon, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just walk away and pretend he hadn't seen it. Without a second thought, he scooped it up gently, shielding it from the sun with his hands, and pressing it close to his chest. He started walking quickly, then broke into a run. The heat made everything harder. His legs felt heavy, but stopping wasn't an option. When he got home, he rummaged through drawers and boxes until he found a soft cloth, fashioning a makeshift nest inside an old shoebox. His hands trembled slightly as he carefully placed the tiny creature inside. Nathan had no clue what such a small, fragile animal could even eat. Grabbing his phone, he searched frantically for information. He snapped a few pictures and posted them on an online forum, hoping someone would have an answer. The replies came fast, but they weren't what he wanted to hear. Most people said creatures this tiny rarely survived without their mother. Some even suggested he let nature take its course. A lump formed in his throat. That wasn't an option. He wasn't the kind of person who gave up easily. Ignoring the pessimistic comments, he kept researching until he found something useful. He learned that he could try feeding it a special formula using a dropper. From that moment on, his routine changed completely. Every 2 hours without fail, he got up to feed the tiny creature, carefully ensuring each drop made it safely into its mouth. The exhaustion weighed on him, but quitting was never an option. A few hours later, as he watched the small being curled up in its soft little nest, he decided it needed a name. He studied its fragile body, barely bigger than the palm of his hand, and a small smile tugged at his lips. He named it Peanut, because it was tiny, but somehow it already seemed strong enough to survive. The first few days were a real battle. Peanut was too fragile. His tiny body trembled with every breath, and Nathan feared that at any moment he might simply stop fighting. Every morning he woke up with a tightness in his chest, hesitating before checking the makeshift box, afraid he'd be met with nothing but silence. But to his surprise, Peanut was tougher than he seemed. Despite his weakness, he clung to life with quiet determination. Small progress felt like major victories. At first, just seeing him open his mouth to accept a dropper or move his little paws was enough to bring Nathan immense relief. With each passing day, Peanut grew a little stronger, and without realizing it, their bond deepened. Weeks went by, and subtle changes began to appear. Small tufts of fur started growing where there had only been thin, wrinkled skin. Nathan watched in fascination, as if witnessing a slow-motion miracle. He could now make out delicate little paws, and a thin, elongated tail that stretched as the tiny creature gained strength. Peanut was no longer just an undefined mystery. He was taking shape, revealing himself bit by bit. A month later, the transformation was impossible to ignore. Peanut was no longer just a helpless newborn. He was a curious, energetic little creature, climbing furniture and exploring every corner he could find. One moment of distraction was all it took for him to vanish, leaving Nathan to search the entire house. One night, panic set in when he realized Peanut wasn't in his makeshift nest. He searched the shelves, drawers, even the laundry basket. His heartbeat quickened with every passing minute, just as he started to wonder if the little one had somehow escaped through the window. He caught a tiny movement inside the pocket of an old jacket, hanging behind the door, and there he was, curled up like a tiny ball of fur, sleeping soundly. Nathan let out a deep breath followed by a soft laugh of disbelief. By then he'd fully accepted that Peanut was part of his life. He set up a special space for his little companion, installing platforms and small shelves along the walls. Peanut loved his new playground, leaping between furniture, hanging from edges, and rolling from one corner to another. One evening, as Nathan watched TV, Peanut leaped from a shelf, and for a brief moment seemed to float in the air, before landing smoothly on the couch. Nathan frowned. That wasn't just a regular jump. He had stretched the skin between his paws, almost as if he were trying to glide. Over the next few days, Nathan paid closer attention. It wasn't just a one-time thing. Peanut did it again and again, jumping from high places and spreading his tiny body in the air before landing. This wasn't just an instinctual reflex. He was actually gliding. Curious, Nathan grabbed his phone and started searching. Small mammal that jumps and seems to glide. Rodent with skin between its paws. Animals that glide in the air. The first Results showed general information about squirrels and mice. But as he refined his search, some images began to look familiar. Some showed small flying squirrels with the same thin tail and large dark eyes. Nathan started to suspect, but how could a flying squirrel have ended up alone on the street? Still unsure, he decided to post on the same forum where he had first asked for help. Update on the little one I rescued. He's doing great, full of energy, but he has a strange behavior. He seems to be trying to glide through the air. Has anyone ever seen this before? This time, the responses were immediate. Among the comments filled with surprise and curiosity, one in particular caught Nathan's attention. That's not strange at all. Your little one isn't just any rodent. That's a flying squirrel. Another user added a link to an article about the species, explaining how they were nocturnal animals, rarely seen by humans, and more commonly found in forests across the southern United States. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. The idea of raising such a unique creature fascinated him. He spent hours devouring articles, watching videos, and reading forum discussions about flying squirrels, learning details he never would have imagined. They were agile, elusive, and naturally avoided human contact whenever possible. But Peanut was different. Raised by Nathan, from his earliest moments, he didn't behave like a wild animal. He loved climbing onto Nathan's shoulder, curling up near his neck while he watched TV or worked on his computer. Sometimes he would sit still for long moments, just observing the world with his large, bright eyes, as if taking in every detail beside his human. Now that Nathan knew exactly what the Peanut was, he wanted to make sure he met all of his needs. He adjusted his diet, introducing nuts, seeds, and fresh fruits. It didn't take long to discover Peanut's absolute favorite, walnuts. But not just for eating. He seemed to enjoy carrying them around, clutching a walnut nearly the size of his head, turning it in his tiny paws, trying to tuck it away in different corners of the house. Nathan found it hilarious, watching as the little squirrel went on his mysterious mission to hide each walnut like he was preparing for winter. But as Peanut grew and showed more of his natural instincts, an unsettling question began to haunt Nathan. Should he release him into the wild? The thought weighed heavily on him. He knew that a wild animal's instinct was to live in freedom, leaping from tree to tree under the open sky. Peanut deserved that life. But at the same time, the idea of letting him go felt unbearable. What if he didn't know how to find food on his own? What if he couldn't escape predators? Nathan sought advice. Experts explained that an animal raised by humans from infancy would have little chance of surviving in the wild. Peanut didn't know the dangers of the outside world, didn't know what to avoid, how to defend himself. And there was something else, something impossible to ignore. The little squirrel was attached to him. Peanut wasn't just a temporary guest. He followed Nathan everywhere, ran to his hand whenever he felt uncertain, and curled up inside his sleeve on cold days. Nathan couldn't deny it anymore. He wasn't sure if Peanut needed him more, or if he needed Peanut. Deciding to keep Peanut wasn't easy. Nathan weighed all the options, thinking carefully about what would be best for his little companion and for himself. In the end, he knew he couldn't let him go. Having been raised in a safe environment, Peanut would never survive in the wild. And Nathan, for his part, couldn't imagine his life without him anymore. Determined to give Peanut the best life possible, he invested all his savings into creating a large indoor space, designing an environment where the squirrel could jump and glide safely. The setup included platforms, branches, and hideouts, a real playground for him. When the installation was finally complete, and Nathan saw Peanut exploring his new home with excitement, he knew he had made the right choice. Nathan's life changed completely with Peanut's presence. The little squirrel quickly became a beloved figure among friends and neighbors. People would stop by just to meet the flying squirrel, who, against all odds, had survived and become an inseparable companion. Nathan decided to share their story on social media, posting photos and videos of Peanut's antics. To his surprise, it didn't take long before Peanut became an internet sensation. There was something undeniably charming about the way he peeked out from Nathan's shirt pocket, his bright eyes curiously observing the world. In videos, he climbed bookshelves, glided through the air, and occasionally knocked things over, much to the delight of his growing audience. Even at Nathan's office, Peanut became somewhat of a celebrity. Nathan started bringing him to work, where he entertained his co-workers with his acrobatics. One day he caused a real stir by gliding across the office, between desks, leaving employees somewhere between startled and amazed. Although naturally nocturnal, Peanut gradually became more active during the day, adjusting to the movement of the house and Nathan's daily routine. But his nighttime instincts never disappeared entirely. When night fell, while Nathan relaxed on the couch, Peanut still seemed full of energy. He would sit with him watching TV, but soon he'd grow restless, climbing furniture, exploring corners of the house, and even pushing small objects around just to see where they would land. Sometimes Nathan would wake up in the middle of the night to faint noises, and when he turned on the light, he'd find Peanut perched on top of a shelf, staring at him as if waiting for him to go back to sleep so he could continue his adventures. Even though he had learned to follow his owner's rhythm during the day, Peanut remained at heart a creature of the night. Nathan's dogs were also caught off guard by the new housemate. First, he worried they might see the tiny squirrel as prey, but to his surprise, Peanut quickly took control of the house dynamic. He figured out how to tease the dogs, leaping over them and darting away before they could react. In no time, he had become part of the pack. Time passed and Nathan realized Peanut was more than just a pet. He was a constant presence, a source of joy, and a daily reminder of how small moments can change everything. The fragile creature he had once found near death had now become his best friend. Peanut never stopped surprising him. He learned how to open his own cage, developed an unusual love for popcorn on movie nights, and even seemed to recognize his name when called. Every day, Nathan discovered something new about him and about himself. Their story went viral, and soon Nathan started receiving messages from people touched by his dedication. Some said they had never thought about the connection between humans and animals that way. Others shared their own rescue stories. The bond between Nathan and Peanut inspired strangers across the world. More than once, Nathan found himself thinking back to the day he had first spotted that tiny, helpless creature lying motionless on the curb. Everything could have turned out differently, but by chance or fate, their paths crossed. And in the end, it wasn't just Peanut who had been saved. Nathan had found something he didn't even know he needed. A friend for life. Imagine an exhausted couple, desperately trying to soothe their crying baby. In the corner of the room, a Doberman watches in silence, his eyes locked onto every movement of the child. Then, unexpectedly, he moves slowly, carefully until his muzzle touches the baby's warm skin. What happens next? Is he showing affection or something deeper? Could an ancient instinct be awakening? Curious to find out what happens next? Ready to experience the emotions of this incredible story? Don't miss the next video on Curious Whiskers. Click on the video on your screen and join me. Great emotions come with great stories.